Hey everyone, I'm Brandon, and today I'm starting a series that I've wanted to do for some time. I call it Grade A Reviews. Get it? Because the channel name is Beef Sneeze, and beef's typically graded on a letter scale. Fuck it, whatever. I've wanted to do game reviews for quite some time, and while I admit I'm not super educated on all the dirty details of game design, I do know what I like and don't like as a longtime consumer and as someone who's been really into games as a whole since I can remember. Now, since this is a review series, I do plan to give a decently detailed breakdown of where the games that I play shine and where they may be lacking. Each game is going to be graded on a letter scale of A through F, and that grade will be determined by the way the game performs in each of the following 5 categories: story, gameplay, sound, graphics, and replayability. Each of these categories will be scored out of 10 points, which will then contribute to the overall score and letter grade the game receives at the end. Now that all the intro garbage is out of the way, I think it's time to kick off the inaugural episode of this series with a game that's very near and dear to my heart: Lisa, the Painful RPG. Lisa the Painful RPG is an indie RPG developed and published by Love Brad Games, formerly Dingling Productions, using the software RPG Maker VX Ace, which you can actually buy on Steam right now. It was initially funded on Kickstarter back in 2013 with a goal of $7,000. It ended up smashing that goal and hit both of its stretch goals, finally totaling $16,492, making it the only game ever to be funded by Kickstarter to not be hot, stinky garbage. It was finally released in December 2014 on Steam to pretty positive reviews, but seems to have really flown under most people's radars. I had to introduce my entire group of friends to it just so I would have people to talk to about it. Possibly the most interesting thing about Lisa is that it was written, coded, and scored all by one man, the legendary Austin Jorgensen. Not only is he a writer, a game developer, and a musician, this dude's also a weapons master. Clearly, he is the most alpha of all males, and we're but lowly peons compared to him. In 2015, Jorgensen released a DLC follow-up to Lisa the Painful called Lisa the Joyful, continuing and finally completing the story that was started all the way back in the very first Lisa game, which was actually a freeware puzzle game, very similar to Yume Nikki and all the other games that came out derivative of that. It's not required to have played the first one to understand the story of both the Painful and the Joyful, but I think it helps to get the full context, but I won't be talking about it at all in this review. Lisa is much more than just your average game, and a lot of that can be credited to its great story and how well written it is. On the surface, Lisa is but a recovering drug addict just trying to find his adopted daughter, who's the only girl in a horrible wasteland populated by a bunch of pervs and psychopaths. Think about it as kind of like Earthbound meets Fist of the North Star meets Buff Gay Men. I mean, when put like that, it does sound kind of silly, but it really is genuinely touching, and it's in some cases a heart-wrenching story with great and memorable characters and choices that actually feel like they matter in some form. Now, I'm a sucker for well-written characters, and honestly, a vast majority of the characters and party members you come across in Lisa are super memorable, even one-off enemies like the bulldozer guy. I mean, what other game is going to dedicate a whole flashback sequence to just some dude you fight in a bulldozer? Nothing in the story really feels that contrived or boring, and the characters really have realistic motivations and depth. And on top of all this, it's really fucking funny. This game can range from making you laugh hysterically to feeling genuine concern for the main character Brad and the people you're journeying with. Brad feels real and like an actual person with concrete motivation and morals, and in video games that really goes a long way. You come to feel for Brad on his journey, and after seeing what he's gone through in the past, with the hands of his father and at the hands of Buzzo, the main villain, and what he continues to go through, you start to root for him, and you want him to succeed. In a day and age where so many games, Fallout 4, Bioshock Infinite, do nothing to make you give a shit about the main character or any of the things you're doing, Lisa stands out as a testament to just how good games can be at conveying emotion. In addition to this, it actually makes you feel like the choices you make over the course of the game have weight and affect the story. Again, in a day and age where studios would rather give you the illusion of choice, this does go a long way. Now, I'm not gonna lie, after playing the Painful and the expansion, I got genuinely emotional at the conclusion. No other game has really elicited an actual emotional response from me like that, and that says a whole lot, I think. I don't want to give away too much about the plot, which is why I haven't really given any plot details outside the general premise, but it's definitely a story that is best experienced on your own and completely blind. Don't look up any walkthroughs, any gameplay videos, just go for it. In the story category, Lisa gets a 10 out of 10. Lisa, at its core, is a turn-based RPG. Normally, I'd give that like a 5 out of 10 in the gameplay section because while the turn-based system does work well, it's nothing too interesting or innovative. However, Lisa does change the formula a tiny bit by adding the ability to string together combos with Brad and Rage Ironhead, the luchador who fights only using headbutts. These combos, while just different strings of the W, A, S, and D keys, do add a little bit of depth to the combat and make it more interesting and also more rewarding when you can finally learn the way to string them together correctly to pull off your big special moves. Now, of course, as with any RPG, you have your whole slew of status effects that you can inflict upon your opponents, and you can also buff yourself in a bunch of different ways, but past that, it's just a regular RPG system. It works as intended, and while not the most boring system ever, and while not unplayable by any means, it just doesn't do a whole lot in the way of innovation. But I can't really fault it for that, seeing as it was made entirely an RPG Maker. Now, in addition to these small supplements to the battle system, the overworld segments aren't nearly as boring as they could have been, thanks to the bike that you get early on in the game. The bike makes traveling so much quicker and makes backtracking feel like a lot less of a chore, which you will be doing a lot if you are like me and end up getting lost quite a bit on your first playthrough. Finally, there's the minigame of Russian Roulette. Though you're only forced into doing a couple rounds of it, the Russian Roulette minigame can actually be pretty rewarding if you're getting pretty lucky and can consistently keep winning. You not only get a decent amount of magazines, which is the currency in the world of Lisa, but you can also get some equipment and a new party member if you can get really lucky and make it through all the rounds. Though it's nothing too in-depth, it's still something to break up the strict RPG gameplay, which is nice. Overall, I'd say a 7 out of 10 on the gameplay front. Perhaps the most interesting beast to cover with Lisa is that of the graphics. On one hand, it's pixel art, which I know is a major turnoff for some people, but on the other hand, I feel like the pixel style is very well utilized not only for comedic effect, but also in order to create a vibe of something not being quite right with Brad and the world around him. Personally, I really enjoyed the way that Lisa looked. The character designs were unique and memorable, as you can see here, and the backgrounds and the environments really helped to convey a feeling of being in a desolate wasteland. Not to give too much away, but I do also feel like the pixel style works really well in the more disturbing parts of the game. It's almost jarring to see the things that happen play out in such a minimalistic style, and it really lets you use your imagination in fleshing out the events. Overall, while I know some people don't really enjoy pixel art, I feel like Jorgensen really used it to his advantage in creating the world of Olathe and its inhabitants. Graphics get a 9 out of 10. Lisa's sound design is definitely a highlight of the overall experience, and really goes a long way for my enjoyment of the game. I'm a sucker for a game with a good soundtrack and good sound effects, and boy does Lisa deliver. The sound effects, while somewhat minimal, do a great job of conveying what's going on and the weight of certain actions. Your attacks really pop both visually and sonically, with the sound effects accompanying them really adding a weight and punch to them. Not only are the sound effects great, but the soundtrack is really solid as well. Good as it is, the soundtrack is actually pretty hard to describe. You've probably heard it quietly in the background this whole time, but honestly it's hard to nail down as only being one style. There's a lot of trap influence, clearly, but this is because according to Jorgensen, it was the only sound pack he had bought on Fruity Loops when he was making the soundtrack. Even with these limitations, Jorgensen managed to put together a song for nearly every possible scenario in the game. I'll just play a few examples here so you can kind of see what I mean by the way he captures the different moods of what could be going on at any given time. Soundtrack does a lot to add to the overall world building and really helps capture the mood of the game no matter what part you're at. It's memorable, catchy, and surprisingly fits the narrative very well. For sound, Lisa gets a 10 out of 10. This category is honestly a tough one for Lisa, and a tough one for me to figure out how I want to write it. When I first wrote this section, I wanted to say that Lisa is a game that doesn't need to be replayed and that the first experience is more than enough. And while I partially stand by that still, I've since reconsidered my position and realized that Lisa does have a lot to offer on subsequent playthroughs. The biggest draw to playing multiple times has gotta be the amount of party members you can recruit. Throughout the course of the game, you can recruit up to 30 companions to join you in your quest, and if you're playing through blind for the first time, you definitely aren't going to get all of them. Since all of these characters are pretty interesting and all have different dynamics when you introduce them to the party, it's definitely worth going back through a couple times until you found your favorite lineup. The second big reason to go back to Lisa is the choices that you make throughout the course of the game. Each of these choices has at least some effect on the way you play the game or the way the story ends. Depending on these choices, there are quite a few different endings, and even more when you take the expansion into account. Though the first experience of the game is by far the best, I do think Lisa has quite a bit to offer on subsequent playthroughs, and for that, Lisa gets an 8 out of 10 on replayability. After tallying up all the scores, Lisa gets a 44 out of 50, or an 88%, landing it at about a B+. Now, even though it's a B+ and not like a 10 out of 10 perfect game, Lisa is genuinely one of my favorite games, and it's truly an experience unlike any other. At the moment, it's only $15 on Steam for the full game and the DLC, so there's honestly no reason not to play it. I promise you, this will be the best $15 you spend this year. Hell, I got it on sale during the Steam summer sale for like $3, and I really wish I could go back and pay more for it. It's that worth it. I do feel like Lisa, though overshadowed by other lesser indie games like Undertale, is a true beacon of good game and especially good story design during a time where I feel like it's necessary. After getting disappointment after disappointment from big AAA studios and the releases they try to hype up, I feel like indie developers and the people who really do care about making good games and good stories end up shining even brighter, and Lisa is definitely no exception to that. Now, if you made it this far in the video, I just want to thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, feel free to leave a like. That lets me know that I'm doing something right. If you have any feedback for me, leave it in the comments. I'm definitely open to any sort of feedback you guys have. You know, if you hated it, if you loved it, if you think there's things I could improve, because I know this being my first real, almost long-form review, it's kind of shaky. I'm still working out the kinks, and I still want to try and improve as much as I can, so definitely let me know what you guys think. If you're interested in more of the stuff that I got coming out, definitely make sure to subscribe, because now that I'm done with this one, this first one's always the toughest. Now that I'm done with this one, I definitely feel like I'm ready to put out a bunch more shit, and I got a lot more content coming. Also got the podcast on the channel. It's hopefully weekly, so yeah, look forward to that. You can find 5 episodes of that right now, and a 6th one will be going up pretty soon here, within probably the next couple days. But yeah, anyway, I've been rambling way too much now. Thank you very much for watching, and have a great day.